The first sign that something was wrong came on a cold November evening in downtown Chicago. Rain tapped against the glass walls of the Grand Monarch Hotel, while guests drifted through the marble lobby beneath glittering chandeliers. Most people never noticed the silent battles taking place inside luxury spaces. They only saw elegance, wealth, and polished smiles. Damon Carter noticed everything. At 34, Damon had built one of the fastest-growing hospitality companies in America. His father had worked night shifts as a mechanic in Detroit. His mother taught elementary school students in Lansing. Nothing in his childhood suggested he would someday lead a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Yet years of discipline, sacrifice, and relentless focus had carried him further than anyone expected. That evening, Damon stepped from a rideshare vehicle, wearing faded jeans, a black t-shirt, and a weathered leather jacket. He deliberately left his custom suits in California. He deliberately avoided the private driver usually waiting for him. The disguise was simple. He wanted employees to judge him before they knew who he was. 2 days earlier, his company had quietly completed the acquisition of the Grand Monarch's parent corporation. Public announcements had not yet been released. Only a handful of attorneys, executives, and board members knew the truth. Damon intended to spend several weeks evaluating the properties personally before revealing himself. Inside the lobby, hotel manager Victoria Sterling stood behind the reception desk. At 45, she possessed the polished confidence of someone who had spent years controlling who felt welcome and who did not. Guests admired her efficiency. Corporate reports praised her performance. Few people questioned how those results were achieved. Damon approached the desk calmly. His reservation waited under Carter Hospitality Holdings. The penthouse suite had been secured 3 days earlier. Everything should have been routine. "Good evening," Damon said politely. "I have a reservation under Carter Hospitality Holdings." Victoria glanced up. Her eyes traveled slowly from his shoes to his jacket. Something hardened behind her professional smile. "I'm afraid there must be some mistake," she replied. Damon remained pleasant. "Could you check the system?" Victoria never touched the keyboard. "Sir, our premium accommodations are reserved for registered guests." The words sounded harmless. The meaning was not. Several guests nearby turned their attention toward the conversation. A wealthy couple paused beside the elevators. A businessman lowered his phone. A young bellman froze while pushing a luggage cart. Damon recognized the atmosphere immediately. He had experienced it in boardrooms, country clubs, and private restaurants across America. The language changed. The message never did. "My reservation should already be confirmed, Sharon," Damon said. Victoria crossed her arms. "I think you're confused about the type of establishment this is." A ripple of uncomfortable silence moved through the lobby. An assistant manager named Ryan Brooks stood several feet away. He looked toward the computer screen, then toward Damon. Concern flashed across his face. Victoria noticed his hesitation. "Ryan," she said sharply, "please contact security." The request stunned him. "Maybe we should verify the reservation first," Ryan suggested. Victoria's expression turned icy. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Damon watched quietly as Ryan reluctantly reached for his radio. The humiliation was unfolding exactly as Victoria intended. Public, visible, unmistakable. Security officers began crossing the lobby toward the desk. Guests whispered among themselves. Outside, rain continued falling across Chicago's glowing streets. Damon slipped a hand into his jacket pocket and touched the business card hidden inside. One card could end the situation immediately, but that would also end the truth. Instead, he looked around the room, studying every face, every reaction, every choice. Because before the night ended, everyone inside the Grand Monarch would discover exactly who he was, and the consequences would reach far beyond a single hotel lobby. The two security officers approached with practiced professionalism, but uncertainty lingered in their eyes. Neither man had seen Damon cause a disturbance. Neither had witnessed aggressive behavior. Still, orders were orders. The taller officer stopped several feet away. "Sir, we're being asked to escort you from the property." Damon nodded slowly. "And the reason?" Neither guard answered immediately. Victoria answered for them. "Trespassing." The word echoed across the marble lobby. Several guests exchanged glances. Others appeared relieved. Some looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Damon had spent enough years studying human behavior to recognize every reaction. Most people disliked injustice. Very few people challenged it. Ryan Brooks stood frozen behind the desk. He had already checked the reservation system. The booking existed. The penthouse suite was paid in full. The account belonged to Carter Hospitality Holdings. Everything Damon said was true. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Fear was powerful. Victoria smiled politely at the gathering crowd. "We apologize for the inconvenience, everyone. We simply maintain high standards for our guests' comfort and safety." Several people nodded approvingly. The phrase sounded reasonable. That was what made it dangerous. Damon felt disappointment settle heavily in his chest. Not because of Victoria. People like Victoria existed everywhere. What troubled him were the observers, the witnesses, the people who knew something felt wrong but chose comfort over courage. One of the security officers gently motioned toward the exit. "Sir, please come with us." "Of course," Damon replied. His calmness confused everyone. Victoria expected anger, she expected shouting, perhaps even resistance. Instead, Damon walked beside the guards with quiet dignity. The procession moved slowly across the lobby. Phones appeared. Several guests recorded the scene. A middle-aged woman whispered something to her husband while pointing toward Damon. A young executive smirked while typing messages. An elderly couple watched without expression. Near the lounge area, a young black couple sat silently. Their faces reflected painful recognition. They understood exactly what was happening. The woman lowered her eyes. The man clenched his jaw. Neither spoke. Years of experience had taught them survival. As Damon approached the revolving doors, Victoria followed behind. She wanted an audience. She wanted validation. Most of all, she wanted to be remembered as the woman who protected exclusivity. "This is why proper screening procedures matter," she announced loudly. The statement earned several approving murmurs. Outside, Chicago's cold wind pushed sheets of rain across the sidewalk. The city lights blurred against the wet pavement. Damon stopped at the entrance. For the first time, he turned toward the crowd. The entire lobby seemed to pause. His expression remained calm. His voice remained controlled. Yet something in his eyes made people uncomfortable. "I want everyone here to remember tonight," he said. The room grew silent. "Remember what you saw. Remember what you believed. Most importantly, remember the choices you made." Victoria laughed nervously. "Is that supposed to be a threat?" Damon shook his head. "No." A brief smile touched his face. "It's a lesson." Then he stepped outside. The revolving doors closed behind him. Rain struck his jacket as he walked several yards down the sidewalk. Only then did he remove his phone. His assistant answered immediately. "Good evening, Damon." "Sarah," he said calmly, "it's time." She understood instantly. Years of working together had made lengthy explanations unnecessary. "Should I release the acquisition announcement?" she asked. Damon glanced back through the glass. Inside, Victoria was still entertaining her audience, still celebrating, still convinced she had won. "Yes," Damon replied. "Release everything." A pause followed. "And Sarah?" "Yes?" Damon watched Victoria laughing with several guests. "Schedule an emergency staff meeting." His voice became colder. 20 minutes from now." As Sarah confirmed the request, breaking news alerts began appearing on phones throughout the hotel lobby. Inside, nobody noticed yet, but their world was already beginning to change. Inside the Grand Monarch Hotel, phones began vibrating one after another. At first, nobody paid much attention. Business travelers checked messages. Guests glanced at notifications. Staff members continued working. Then expressions started changing. Confusion replaced confidence. Shock replaced boredom. Near the lounge, a technology investor stared at his screen. "No way," he whispered. His companion leaned closer. "What happened?" The man turned the phone around. A breaking business headline filled the display. "Carter Hospitality Holdings completes multi-billion-dollar acquisition of Monarch Luxury Resorts." Below the headline appeared a professional photograph. The image showed Damon Carter, the same man who had just been escorted from the hotel, the same man Victoria Sterling had publicly humiliated. The investor nearly dropped his drink. Across the lobby, more guests began reading identical headlines. Financial news networks pushed alerts. Business websites published articles. Social media accounts shared photographs. The story spread rapidly. Ryan Brooks felt his stomach sink. He had already connected the pieces. Now everyone else was catching up. Victoria remained oblivious. She stood near the reception desk describing the incident to a small audience. "Experience teaches you these things," she said confidently. "You learn who belongs and who doesn't." Several guests nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. The atmosphere was shifting. Victoria simply had not noticed yet. Outside, Damon stood beneath the covered entrance while speaking with Sarah. "The announcement is everywhere," she reported. "CNN Business, Bloomberg, Fox Business, CNBC. Good. Board members are demanding emergency meetings." Damon smiled faintly. "I imagine they are." Another message appeared on his screen. The hotel's regional director was calling. Damon answered. "Mr. Carter," the executive said nervously, "I just received several alarming reports." "You should probably come to Chicago," Damon replied, "immediately." Inside the hotel, the young black couple had also seen the news. The woman covered her mouth. "It's him." Her husband nodded slowly. "Yes." They both looked toward Victoria. For years they had endured similar experiences, subtle exclusions, polite hostility, invisible barriers disguised as professionalism. Watching the truth unfold felt surreal. At the reception desk, Ryan finally approached Victoria. His face had turned pale. "Victoria, we need to talk." She barely glanced at him. "Not now. It's important." "Then it can wait." Ryan lowered his voice. "The man you removed owns the company." Victoria laughed, a short, dismissive laugh. Then she saw Ryan wasn't smiling. Her expression tightened. "What are you talking about?" Ryan turned his monitor toward her. The headline glowed from the screen. The photograph underneath left no room for doubt. For several seconds, Victoria simply stared. Her confidence evaporated. The blood drained from her face. "That's impossible." "It's not." Before she could respond, the revolving doors turned. Everyone looked up. Damon Carter walked calmly back into the lobby. No security accompanied him. No anger showed on his face. No triumph appeared in his expression. Only certainty. The room fell silent. Guests stopped talking. Employees stopped moving. Even the piano music drifting from hidden speakers seemed distant. Damon approached the reception desk with measured steps. The same desk, the same lobby, the same people. Everything looked identical, yet somehow nothing felt the same. Ryan swallowed hard. "Good evening, Mr. Carter." The title landed like thunder. Several guests gasped. Victoria's knees nearly buckled. Damon nodded politely. "Good evening, Ryan." Then he looked directly at Victoria. The manager who had controlled the room 20 minutes earlier suddenly seemed very small. "Ms. Sterling," Damon said. His voice remained perfectly calm. "I believe we were discussing who belongs here." Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Every eye remained fixed on Victoria. And for the first time that evening, she had absolutely nothing to say. Victoria Sterling felt every eye in the lobby fixed upon her. Only minutes earlier, she had commanded the room with complete confidence. Guests listened to her. Employees obeyed her. Security followed her instructions without question. Now the same people watched in stunned silence. The balance of power had shifted so completely that it almost felt unreal. Victoria looked from Damon to Ryan, then back again. "There must be some misunderstanding," she finally said. The words sounded weak even to her own ears. Damon rested one hand on the reception desk. "Actually, Ms. Sterling, I believe the misunderstanding happened when you decided not to verify my reservation." Nobody spoke. Nobody dared interrupt. Several guests quietly lowered their phones, others continued recording. The technology investor near the lounge was already live-streaming the scene. Thousands of viewers were joining every minute. Ryan swallowed nervously. "The reservation was valid the entire time," he said. Victoria shot him a look. Ryan held her gaze. For the first time in years, he refused to look away. Damon noticed. He made a mental note. Character revealed itself during difficult moments, not easy ones. Victoria struggled to regain control. Mr. Carter, if I made an error, I'm sure we can resolve this privately. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Privately. The word hung in the air. Interesting. The humiliation had been public. Now she wanted privacy. Damon recognized the pattern. Accountability felt very different when consequences arrived. You didn't want privacy 20 minutes ago, Damon replied calmly. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth had nowhere to hide. A notification sounded somewhere in the crowd. Then another. Then another. News outlets continued publishing updates. Articles described Damon Carter as one of America's most influential hospitality executives. Photographs showed him speaking at conferences, appearing on business networks, and receiving industry awards. The contrast was devastating. Everyone suddenly understood what they had witnessed. The young black couple stepped closer. The woman spoke softly. "Mr. Carter, thank you." Damon turned toward her. For what? Her eyes filled with emotion. For not pretending this doesn't happen. Several people lowered their heads. The statement struck harder than any accusation, because everyone knew she was right. Damon nodded respectfully. What happened tonight wasn't unique. The lobby remained silent. That's the real problem. A regional executive suddenly rushed through the entrance. His expensive suit was damp from the rain. His face looked pale. He moved directly toward Damon. "Mr. Carter?" "Good evening, Michael." The executive extended his hand. "I came as quickly as possible." Damon shook it. Guests immediately recognized what the interaction meant. The executive wasn't questioning Damon's authority. He was acknowledging it publicly. Victoria's remaining confidence vanished. Michael turned toward her. His expression hardened. "Ms. Sterling, is it true that you refused to verify a reservation belonging to our CEO?" Victoria struggled for words. "I was following procedures." Ryan's face tightened. Several employees exchanged looks. Nobody believed that explanation. Not anymore. Michael glanced toward Damon. "Would you like me to handle this?" Damon considered the question, then slowly shook his head. "No." The answer surprised everyone. "Tonight isn't about one reservation." His voice remained steady. "It's about culture." A chill seemed to move through the room. Employees straightened. Guests listened carefully. Victoria looked frightened now, truly frightened, because she sensed where the conversation was heading. Damon looked around the lobby. The chandeliers reflected across polished marble. Luxury surrounded them. Beauty, elegance, prestige. Yet beneath it all existed something darker, something hidden, something many people preferred not to discuss. "Tell me something, Victoria," Damon said. His tone remained polite. "If I had entered wearing a designer suit and arrived in a limousine, would this conversation be happening?" Victoria said nothing. The silence became her answer. Several employees looked away. A guest near the elevators quietly muttered, "No." The word carried farther than intended. Damon heard it. So did everyone else. The truth was finally standing in the center of the lobby, and nobody could pretend not to see it anymore. Then Damon's phone vibrated. He looked down. A message from his head of human resources had arrived. His eyes narrowed slightly as he read it. The information on the screen changed everything. Slowly, he lifted his gaze toward Victoria. "Interesting," he said. For the first time all evening, genuine disappointment entered his voice. "This wasn't the first complaint against you." The lobby remained silent as Damon lowered his phone. Victoria's face tightened. "What complaints?" Her voice sounded defensive rather than surprised. That alone told Damon a great deal. Jennifer Martinez, head of human resources for Carter Hospitality Holdings, had spent the past hour reviewing personnel files from the newly acquired company. The message she sent contained information that painted a troubling picture. Not one complaint, not two. 12 separate complaints over the previous 3 years. Most involved guests. Several involved employees. Nearly all described similar patterns. Selective treatment, unfair assumptions, disrespect disguised as policy. The complaints had never resulted in serious consequences. They had simply disappeared into administrative files, protected by a culture that valued profits more than principles. Damon slipped his phone into his pocket. "There have been multiple allegations regarding discriminatory treatment under your management." The word struck Victoria like a physical blow. Those accusations were never proven, she snapped. A murmur moved through the crowd. The response felt rehearsed, too quick, too familiar, as if she had delivered the same defense many times before. Ryan shifted uncomfortably behind the desk. For years he had witnessed incidents that never felt quite right. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious enough to trigger investigations. Just a steady pattern. Certain guests receiving warmer welcomes. Certain applicants never advancing. Certain complaints quietly disappearing. At the time, he convinced himself he was imagining things. Now he wasn't so sure. Michael, the regional executive, looked visibly shaken. 12 complaints? Damon nodded. So far. The phrase hung in the air. So far, meaning there could be more. Victoria crossed her arms. People make accusations all the time. That's the world we live in now. The statement landed badly. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. The young black woman near the lounge looked disgusted. Or maybe people get tired of being treated unfairly, she said. Victoria turned sharply toward her. You don't know anything about this situation. The woman's husband stepped beside her. Actually, we know more than you think. Everyone listened. 3 years ago, he continued, we were denied access to a hotel restaurant in Atlanta despite having reservations. We watched other guests walk in without questions. His wife nodded. Nobody believed us. Silence followed, not because people disagreed, because many suddenly remembered their own experiences. Different details, different locations, the same feeling, being judged before being known. Damon recognized the shift immediately. The conversation was becoming larger than Victoria, larger than one hotel, larger than one night. Truth often worked that way. Once it surfaced, other truths followed. An older guest near the elevators cleared his throat. I served in the Navy for 22 years, he said. Heads turned. I've seen good leaders and bad leaders. The difference is accountability. He looked directly at Victoria. Good leaders examine complaints. They don't dismiss them. Victoria's confidence continued eroding. The room that once supported her was no longer on her side. One by one, people were reconsidering what they had witnessed, reconsidering their silence, reconsidering themselves. Damon stepped forward. Do you know what concerns me most? Nobody answered. Not the discrimination. The statement surprised everyone. Discrimination can be identified and corrected. He paused. What concerns me is how many people saw warning signs and chose not to act. Several employees lowered their eyes. The words hit home, because they were true. Fear explained their silence, but it didn't excuse it. A notification sounded from Michael's phone. His expression darkened. Mr. Carter. Yes? Corporate legal just completed a preliminary review. The executive swallowed. There were settlement agreements. The lobby froze. Victoria's face turned white. Michael looked down at the message. At least 4 discrimination-related settlements over the past 5 years. Gasps echoed through the room. Even Damon felt disappointment settle deeper inside him. The situation was worse than he expected. Much worse. Victoria looked around desperately. The support she once enjoyed had vanished. Guests stared. Employees stared. Security officers stared. Nobody rushed to defend her. For the first time that evening, she stood completely alone. Then another message appeared on Damon's phone. He read it carefully. This time, his expression changed. Not disappointment, resolve. He slowly looked up. The board of directors has just authorized a full investigation across every property in the company. A stunned silence followed, because everyone understood what that meant. Tonight was no longer an isolated incident. It was the beginning of something much bigger. News of the investigation spread through the Grand Monarch faster than any rumor in the hotel's history. Employees checked their phones. Corporate executives exchanged urgent messages. Guests refreshed news feeds every few seconds. What had begun as a single confrontation in a hotel lobby was becoming a national story. Damon remained calm. Years of leadership had taught him an important lesson. Real change never happened through anger alone. It required evidence. It required courage. Most importantly, it required accountability. Victoria stood motionless beside the reception desk. Her confidence had completely vanished. The woman who once controlled every conversation now looked overwhelmed by events she could no longer influence. Michael's phone continued buzzing with updates. He glanced toward Damon. "The board wants a conference call immediately." Damon nodded. "Put them on speaker." Several executives joined within seconds. Their voices filled the lobby. Concern, confusion, urgency. One board member spoke first. "Mr. Carter, we understand there was an incident." Damon looked around the room. There was more than an incident. The board fell silent. There was a culture failure. The words landed heavily because every experienced executive understood the difference. Incidents involved individuals. Culture failures involved systems. Systems created liability. Systems damaged reputations. Systems destroyed companies. Damon continued. Tonight revealed a problem that should have been addressed years ago. Nobody argued, not after the complaints, not after the settlements, not after the witnesses. The evidence had become impossible to ignore. Ryan stood quietly behind the desk. His thoughts raced. He remembered applicants rejected for vague reasons, employees who suddenly resigned, guests who left angry and never returned. At the time, each event seemed isolated. Now he saw the pattern. Patterns were dangerous. Patterns told stories. The wrong story had been unfolding here for years. One board member cleared his throat. "What actions do you recommend?" The question hung in the air. Everyone waited. Damon took a slow breath. "First, independent investigators will review every discrimination complaint from the past 5 years." Michael nodded. Several employees exchanged nervous looks. Damon continued. "Second, every management position will undergo evaluation." Victoria closed her eyes. She knew exactly where this was heading. "Third, we establish anonymous reporting systems for guests and employees." A board member spoke up. "That will be expensive." Damon turned toward the phone. "So is discrimination." Nobody responded, because he was right. The financial markets already reflected the damage. Social media was exploding. News organizations were requesting interviews. Civil rights organizations were contacting corporate headquarters. The cost of ignoring the problem suddenly looked enormous. The young black couple watched quietly. For the first time in years, they felt seen. Not tolerated, not accommodated, seen. That difference mattered. Outside, television vans began arriving. Bright lights flashed across the rain-soaked street. Reporters gathered near the entrance. The story was growing larger by the minute. Jake, the lead security officer, approached Damon. "Sir, media crews are asking for statements." "They can wait." Jake nodded. Something about Damon impressed him. Most executives would rush toward cameras. Most executives would focus on public relations. Damon seemed focused on solutions. The distinction felt important. A new message arrived on Damon's phone. This one came directly from Jennifer Martinez. He read it carefully, then read it again. His expression hardened. Michael noticed immediately. "What is it?" Damon slowly looked up. The review team found something else. Victoria's face lost what little color remained. "What?" Jennifer's report contained newly uncovered information. Internal emails, staff complaints, management communications, documents that had never been included in official investigations, documents that changed everything. Damon stared directly at Victoria. The entire lobby waited. Then he spoke. Someone inside this hotel didn't just ignore complaints. A chill swept through the room. Someone actively helped bury them. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had happened all night. Because this was no longer about poor judgment, it was beginning to look like deliberate misconduct. The revelation hit the lobby like a shockwave. Until that moment, many people had viewed the situation as a management failure. Poor decisions, bad judgment, unacceptable behavior. Now the possibility of something far worse emerged. A cover-up. Victoria gripped the edge of the reception desk. "That's ridiculous," she said. Her voice sounded strained, desperate. Damon held up his phone. Jennifer's team recovered archived communications from company servers. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The entire lobby listened. Several complaints were marked for review. Then they disappeared. Michael's face darkened. Disappeared? Removed from active investigation records. The regional executive looked stunned. That wasn't negligence. That required action, intentional action. Victoria shook her head. I don't know anything about that. Damon studied her expression. Years of negotiations had taught him how to read people. Fear looked different from innocence, and Victoria looked terrified. Outside, reporters continued gathering. Bright camera lights reflected across the wet streets of Chicago. Inside, the atmosphere felt electric. Employees whispered among themselves. Questions multiplied. Who knew? How long had it been happening? How many complaints had vanished? Ryan felt sick. For years he trusted the system. Now he wondered how much had happened beyond his view. A housekeeper approached cautiously from the back corridor. Her name tag read Maria Santos. She had worked at the Grand Monarch for 11 years. Most executives never noticed her. Damon did. Mr. Carter, she said quietly. Yes? Maria hesitated, then made a decision. I filed a complaint 3 years ago. The room turned toward her. Her hands trembled. Nothing happened. Victoria immediately interrupted. That's not true. Maria ignored her. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. My supervisor called me names in front of guests. When I reported it, Human Resources said they would investigate. 2 months later, they told me there wasn't enough evidence. Her eyes filled with emotion. Nobody even interviewed me. Silence followed, painful silence, the kind created when uncomfortable truths finally emerge. Another employee stepped forward, then another, a bartender, a front desk associate, a maintenance worker. One by one, stories surfaced. Small stories, personal stories, stories that never reached headlines. Yet together they revealed something larger, a pattern, a culture, a system that protected itself. Michael looked horrified. Why wasn't this reported? The bartender laughed bitterly. Reported to who? Nobody answered, because everyone understood. A complaint process meant nothing if the people receiving complaints refused to act. The board members listening through the speakerphone grew increasingly quiet. Corporate liability calculations raced through their minds. Lawsuits, investigations, media scrutiny, financial losses. But Damon wasn't thinking about numbers. He was thinking about people. Maria, Ryan, the young couple, every employee who learned to stay silent, every guest who left feeling unwelcome. Those costs never appeared on balance sheets, yet they damaged organizations more deeply than any financial loss. Jennifer joined the call directly. Damon, we've completed a preliminary audit. What did you find? The lobby became completely silent. Evidence suggests at least 21 complaints were closed improperly across multiple properties. Gasps echoed through the room. 21, not 1, not 2. 21. Victoria looked as though the floor had disappeared beneath her. Jennifer continued. Several closures required management approval. Michael slowly turned toward Victoria. The implication was obvious. No one needed to say it aloud. The evidence was building. The story was growing. And the consequences were approaching. Damon looked around the lobby. The same lobby where guests had watched him escorted out less than 2 hours earlier. Everything felt different now. Truth had a way of changing rooms, changing people, changing futures. Then another notification appeared on Damon's phone. This one came from an external source, a major national newspaper. Investigative reporters had uncovered something connected to the hotel's history, something dating back nearly a decade, something far bigger than Victoria Sterling. Damon read the headline, his expression hardened immediately, because he suddenly realized the problem didn't start with her, and it might not end with her either. Damon stared at the article on his phone. The headline came from a respected national newspaper known for exposing corporate misconduct. The report detailed years of discrimination allegations involving multiple properties within the former Monarch Luxury Resorts organization. Not isolated complaints, not individual incidents. A decade-long pattern. His jaw tightened. The lobby watched him carefully. Everyone sensed the significance of what he was reading. Michael stepped closer. What is it? Damon looked up. This problem goes back much further than anyone realized. The words landed heavily. Jennifer's voice came through the speakerphone. How far? Damon scrolled through the article. Almost 10 years. Several employees gasped. Victoria's eyes widened. For the first time that evening, genuine fear crossed her face. Not fear for her position, fear of what might be uncovered. The article described former employees from properties in Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, Phoenix, and Miami. Different people, different locations, identical experiences, complaints ignored, promotions denied, guests treated differently based on assumptions about race, appearance, or background. The consistency was impossible to dismiss. Ryan felt sick. He had believed the Grand Monarch was an isolated case. Now he understood something much larger had been operating beneath the surface. A corporate culture capable of surviving leadership changes. A culture capable of teaching itself to new managers. Damon addressed the board directly. "We are not dealing with a personnel issue anymore." Nobody interrupted. "We're dealing with institutional failure." Silence followed. Every executive listening understood the gravity of those words. Personnel problems could be solved with terminations. Institutional failures required transformation. Outside, reporters continued arriving. National media had joined local stations. The story was spreading across the country. Inside the lobby, employees continued stepping forward. People who had remained silent for years suddenly found courage. A concierge described unfair hiring practices. A restaurant supervisor recalled guest complaints that mysteriously disappeared. A former military veteran working maintenance shared how concerns were dismissed repeatedly. Each story added another piece to the puzzle. Each story made denial more difficult. Victoria stood alone, completely alone. Nobody defended her. Nobody supported her explanations. The authority she once possessed had evaporated. Finally, she spoke. "I wasn't the only one." The statement shocked the room. Michael stared at her. "What does that mean?" Victoria looked exhausted, years older than she had appeared earlier. "I learned from people above me." Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. "When I started here, I was told certain guests generated problems. Certain employees weren't management material. Certain complaints created unnecessary attention." The confession stunned everyone. She continued speaking, perhaps because she knew there was no point hiding anymore. The culture already existed. I didn't create it. Damon listened carefully. He wasn't interested in excuses, but he was interested in truth. And sometimes truth came from unexpected places. Jennifer immediately responded, "Even if that's true, you still made choices." Victoria lowered her eyes. She couldn't argue. Because it was true. Systems influenced behavior. Individuals still made decisions. The room remained quiet, thoughtful, reflective. The conversation had evolved beyond blame. Now it focused on responsibility. Damon looked around the lobby, at employees, at guests, at witnesses. "Every system is made of people," he said. His voice carried across the marble floor, "and every system changes when people decide to act differently." Several employees nodded. The statement resonated because they suddenly understood they weren't powerless. They never had been. Fear had convinced them otherwise. Another message appeared on Damon's phone. This time, it came from federal investigators reviewing historical employment complaints connected to several former Monarch properties. His eyes narrowed. The situation had just become even more serious. He slowly lifted his gaze toward Michael. "The government is requesting documents." The room froze. National investigations, corporate audits, media scrutiny, everything was escalating. Then Damon read the final line of the message. And for the first time that night, even he looked surprised. Because among the requested files was the name of a former executive long believed retired. A man who had helped build the entire hotel empire. A man whose fingerprints appeared everywhere, and whose involvement threatened to expose a scandal far larger than anyone imagined. The revelation about the retired executive changed everything. Until that moment, most people believed the investigation would end with Victoria Sterling and a handful of managers. Now a much larger possibility emerged. What if the culture had been designed from the top? What if discrimination wasn't tolerated by leadership? What if leadership had helped create it? The lobby remained silent as Damon reread the message. Federal investigators wanted access to decades of internal records. Emails, hiring reports, promotion data, settlement agreements, financial records, everything. Michael looked uneasy. "Do they suspect criminal activity?" Damon carefully chose his words. They suspect systemic misconduct. Nobody needed further explanation. The implications were enormous. Jennifer joined the conversation again. We've identified the executive they're investigating. A photograph appeared on Damon's phone. Several board members immediately recognized the face. Richard Holloway, former chief operations officer, architect of the company's rapid expansion during the early 2000s. Industry legend, award winner, philanthropist, publicly respected, privately untouchable. Or so everyone believed. The lobby felt colder somehow. Several employees exchanged nervous glances. Ryan recognized the name immediately. Every manager in the company knew Richard Holloway. His leadership manuals still influenced corporate training programs. His quotes appeared in company materials. His legacy was everywhere. And now that legacy was under investigation. Victoria slowly sank into a chair. For the first time all evening, she stopped defending herself. She simply listened. Perhaps because she finally understood the truth. The system she served so faithfully had never intended to protect her. People like Richard Holloway created policies. People like Victoria enforced them. When consequences arrived, only one group remained protected. The people at the top. Damon noticed the realization crossing her face. It wasn't sympathy he felt, it was understanding. Systems often convinced ordinary people to defend harmful practices, then abandoned them when accountability arrived. Outside, national news broadcasts had begun covering the story live. Helicopters circled above downtown Chicago. The Grand Monarch had become the center of a national conversation. Inside, Damon addressed everyone gathered in the lobby. "I want to make something clear." Every eye turned toward him. This investigation isn't about revenge. The statement surprised some people. Others looked skeptical. Damon continued, "Revenge focuses on punishment. Accountability focuses on truth." Several employees nodded. The distinction mattered. Truth created lasting change. Punishment alone rarely did. The young black couple stood together near the lounge. The woman smiled faintly. For the first time that night, hope outweighed frustration. Not because justice was guaranteed, but because someone was finally willing to confront the problem openly. Jennifer's voice interrupted the moment. "Damon, we found additional records." The lobby tensed. What kind of records? Training documents, internal communications, executive directives. A pause followed, then Jennifer delivered the news. Some of the language closely mirrors what Victoria described earlier. Michael looked horrified. Board members began speaking over one another. Questions, concerns, legal implications. The situation was spiraling far beyond anyone's expectations. Damon remained calm. Years in business had taught him that panic never solved problems. Only clarity did. He raised his hand. The room became quiet again. "Tomorrow morning," he announced, "a full independent review begins across every property in the company." Employees exchanged surprised looks. Every complaint will be examined. More silence. Every employee will have the opportunity to speak without fear of retaliation. Maria Santos wiped tears from her eyes. Several others looked emotional as well. Because for the first time, someone was listening. Not pretending, not delaying. Listening. Then Damon's phone rang. An unfamiliar number, Washington, D.C. He answered. The voice on the other end identified himself immediately. A senior federal investigator. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When it ended, Damon slowly lowered the phone. The room watched him carefully. "What happened?" Michael asked. Damon looked around the lobby, at the employees, at the guests, at Victoria. Then he delivered the news. "Richard Holloway isn't retired." Confused expressions appeared everywhere. Damon continued, "He's currently serving on the boards of 3 major hospitality corporations." The room froze, because everyone suddenly understood. The investigation was no longer about one company, or one hotel, or one manager. It was about an entire industry. And the most powerful people involved were only beginning to realize their names were about to enter the spotlight. 3 months later, the hospitality industry looked very different. What began as a confrontation in a Chicago hotel lobby had evolved into the largest cultural reckoning the industry had experienced in decades. Federal investigators expanded their review across multiple corporations. Civil rights organizations launched independent audits. Major hotel chains rushed to re-evaluate hiring practices, promotion standards, and complaint procedures. And complaint. For years, executives had treated discrimination as a public relations risk. Now they understood it as an existential threat. The investigation into Richard Holloway produced shocking results. Thousands of internal documents surfaced. Archived emails revealed patterns stretching back nearly 15 years. Performance metrics rewarded exclusion under coded language. Managers received praise for maintaining a certain image. Guest complaints were filtered based on who submitted them. Promotion opportunities quietly favored some employees while limiting others. None of it appeared obvious in isolation. Together, it revealed a system. Several corporations severed ties with Holloway within weeks. Board positions disappeared. Consulting contracts vanished. Industry awards were quietly removed from official websites. The man who once shaped luxury hospitality became a symbol of everything the industry wanted to leave behind. Meanwhile, the Grand Monarch Hotel underwent a transformation. Not cosmetic, not performative, fundamental. Ryan Brooks was promoted to general manager after completing extensive leadership training. His first decision surprised many people. He invited employees from every department to help redesign workplace policies. Housekeepers, servers, maintenance workers, front desk associates, people whose voices had rarely been heard. The results exceeded expectations. Employee satisfaction increased dramatically. Guest ratings reached record highs. Staff turnover dropped to its lowest level in company history. People performed better when they felt respected. The lesson seemed obvious. Yet many organizations had spent years ignoring it. One spring afternoon, Damon returned to the Grand Monarch. Sunlight poured through the lobby windows. The atmosphere felt completely different. Families relaxed near the lounge. Business travelers worked comfortably in shared spaces. Employees greeted guests naturally and confidently. Nobody seemed concerned about who belonged. Everyone belonged. Maria Santos met Damon near the reception desk. She smiled, a genuine smile. "Things are different now," she said. "I can see that," Damon replied. Maria looked around the lobby. People aren't afraid anymore. Those words meant more than any financial report. Across the country, similar transformations were occurring. Companies adopted independent reporting systems. Leadership programs emphasized accountability. Employees received meaningful protections. The movement continued growing, not because one executive demanded it, because thousands of people finally decided silence was no longer acceptable. Later that evening, Damon stood alone near the same entrance where security officers had escorted him out months earlier. He remembered the humiliation, the anger, the disappointment. But he also remembered something else. Choice. Every person in that lobby had faced a choice. Some chose comfort, some chose courage, some chose accountability. Those choices changed lives. As the city lights illuminated downtown Chicago, Damon reflected on the lesson that emerged from the experience. Systems are powerful, but systems are built by people, which means people can rebuild them. Justice rarely arrives all at once. It arrives through countless decisions made by ordinary individuals willing to do the right thing. The Grand Monarch was no longer famous for exclusion. It had become known for transformation. And transformation, Damon realized, was always more powerful than revenge. Before leaving, he glanced one final time across the thriving lobby. Employees laughed. Guests relaxed. The atmosphere felt welcoming, authentic, human. The way hospitality was always meant to feel. Damon smiled and walked toward the doors. The future remained uncertain. Challenges would continue. New battles would emerge. But one truth remained clear. Dignity is not something people earn. It is something every person deserves. And when enough people choose to defend it, even the most powerful systems can change. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.